we can share about when things get stressful, when things get really too much, right? Too much on our plate and we need a break from all that. What is your go-to, like for back to basic, like to feel, to come back to yourself and to,
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I've always gone to nature, because I always know it quietens the mind. There's just, it just has a real natural, what's the word? Natural fix. It's a natural reset.
Yeah.
Without you sort of even thinking, you always sort of walk in and you find a lot of people, I see the ones on the trails, and particularly the runners that, they might be going through a lot of things in their own life, but that's the only time that they can, escape and then just have that little bit of time to think and then just process, and they're amongst nature. So it's a natural healing ground. I'm not saying you have to have anything wrong, but it just seems to be nature knows what to do.
Yeah, definitely.
And you just got to allow yourself that time to be amongst it. And like yesterday when I went for a trail run, that was my first run back after a couple of months since I fractured my rib. And the first thing that I heard was the kookaburras going off, and they laugh and heckle, and oh God, I miss that, and it's because it's such an Australian thing. And, just to be, welcomed by that noise, and you just kind of feel like you're just totally immersed. And, I find anything that's nature, based, you can't go wrong. So whether it's that or even a walk on the beach or sitting in the park, just something where you can just be.
Yeah.
What do you do, or where do you go?
Well, for me, anytime I feel stuck, anytime I feel blocked, anytime I feel stressed or upset or anything, right? Anything that throws me off, I'll go for a walk. And it doesn't matter where, but usually I'll walk towards the beach. That's just by default, right? You just walk towards the beach, because then when you reach there, you hear the waves, you breathe in the fresh air and, the greenery and all that just automatically puts you in a different mood, right? So for me, walking, and sometimes if the weather doesn't look very good, then I don't head towards the beach. I'll just walk, on the street and just walk anywhere where there's a footpath, where even, if it's covered footpath beneath the buildings, just walk, just to get the energy moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really, really, for me, it keeps the energy going, and it feels as if I'm also grounding, stuff that has been accumulated. So for me, that's my back to basics, walking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. You see a lot of people out there walking, and, you generally come back as a different person. You've got, all the feel-good hormones that have started to kick in as well. It's a change of environment. It's just a separation away from, where you were. You can come back to that. It's kind of that escape.
So my daughter and I, we have this habit of taking walks and talking. We talked about what's been happening, what she's feeling and all that. So we tend to walk a lot together. So it's been, I enjoy that. It's really quiet, no interruptions, right?
We had the best therapy session.
Yeah.
The things that we do, like we would just, meet, say, for a 5 o'clock run or a 6 o'clock run, whatever the time was. It's usually run for an hour. And then all of a sudden, because we just start to chat, and it takes your mind off, the running. Like if we were just going for a normal run, obviously not if it was intentional intervals or things like that. Obviously we can't talk then. But, like our long, slower, easy run, for instance. And we'll just chat away. And I remember there was quite a few comments going, oh God, this is the best therapy.
Yeah.
You're just exchanging, things that are happening in your life with other people who actually have been going through the same thing. So it's that connection. And reassurance that everything's going to be okay. And I wouldn't have done half the things if I didn't have, my group of friends that we used to get together all the time. And I used to just love it. And, because of our connection, then we would look at different things that we can go and do or train for. And, we just achieved a lot talking the whole time.
And it keeps your mind off the running, right?
Gauge that if I was working hard, because you wouldn't hear much from me. But it does. It's like next minute, oh gosh, I'm there, and you can do that whole thing all by yourself. And it feels like it's taken 10 times longer.
Yeah.
Having that group and, being outside, there's a lot for it, in just movement. And the last thing you feel like doing a lot of the time is moving. And, particularly if there's a lot of stressful things happening and you're really tired. But a simple thing like just going for a walk, even if it's just a walk around the block, just to change that environment, and break it up a little bit, does help enormously.
Yeah. And sweating is so good because it's you feel like, okay, my body's detoxing. I don't understand how. I'm not sure whether, it's common there in Australia, but in Singapore with women, they don't like to sweat. Maybe it ruins their makeup. I don't know. But, they really dislike the sun and they don't want to sweat because they say, oh, sweating I don't like how it feels. But our skin is the largest organ, right, in our body. And that's how we detox. And if you don't get to detox, then where's it all going to go? Yeah, that's
True. I don't mind sweating. That comes with my, territory, but that's fine. But if I'm dressed really nicely and I go out somewhere, it's the sweatiness where I don't feel very good, like I'm all, I would have gone to an effort to do my hair or my makeup or, iron my clothes. And then all of a sudden it's just like a limp mess. I call it a sweat mess.
Yeah. I mean, that I totally understand, but for a lot of women, it's like they avoid exercising or going out for a walk because they don't want to sweat.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that you've mentioned it, there's a few like that, say in the gym, that they like to do the weights as long as it's not too excessive, but they won't do the cardio because they don't like to sweat.
How interesting.
The body is designed to sweat, but I know that they don't like it at all. So
that's a very basic human ability, right?
It can also come, maybe with smell. They might not have a change of clothes afterwards. There's quite a few things. And it was interesting. In my second job, they taught me to make, like cocktails at the pool bar. And it's been a skill that I've never learned before. I would rather drink them. And I really enjoy the energy of just, making, the drinks around the pool. But it's been so hot and they've got like a humidifier and everything in there and to try and do as much as they can. But it's, you're out in the, the environment as part of the, what do you call it? It's an open sort of area. It's not a closed area. And then I brought these beautiful strawberry daiquiris out and they've got the nice strawberry garnish and, the nice sprig of bright green mint and it looks so lush. It looks like a slushie. And I brought them over to these guests and she said, oh gosh, you're handling the sweat. How are you finding this heat? That's right. And I said, how do I look? And I turned, you could just see that down my back. I felt like I'd gone for a run. She said, you've composed yourself very well. And then so in that situation, because then I have to front up, to go back, there's the aircon and I think I just feel so, unprofessional because I feel like I'm in a sweat, man. Mind you, all the staff, the ones that do the pool bar, like we've got the general manager, all hands are on deck. They're exactly the same. It's not just me.
Yeah.
But I just don't feel like I'm professional in that way. But if I'm out going for a run, not a problem.
Yeah. Well, but then it's the weather. There's nothing you can do about it.
That's it. You just have to select your clothing. And like linen is really good for that. But you just need to, dress accordingly. So, yeah, I know some women don't like the feeling of the sweat because it makes their clothes damp, which will give them a smell. So I do understand that in a way, but I don't know. I just think that they could just, harden up a little bit.
Yeah, I think adjustments can be made, like bring fresh clothes with you and have a shower after a workout, right? I mean, you and I, tropical weather, you just have to shower, right?
Oh, you got to shower all the time. Like it's just, my hair is always up. I know if it's down, like the humidity just like goes insane. And I think it's just a waste of time.
Yeah, exactly. Same.
Yeah. So I think, like what we're talking about, coming back to basics in times of need and, everything we need a lot of the time is just directly under our nose. We just don't see it. I remember when I lost my mum unexpectedly a couple of years ago and I was having a lot of trouble with my sisters that I've mentioned in my book. That situation, it was that really toxic environment. And, I hadn't even had the space to go and mourn for, my mum. And it wasn't until, my partner recognized this straight away and he said, you need to go for a walk,
Yeah.
He picked me up from work and he just said, right, we're going and we're going to go for a walk. So we went into the national park, went out to this beautiful spot and that's when I saw and felt my mum. But it was just amazing. If I think that had he not done that, I would have completely missed that because I was just so caught up in everything that was happening. But that really I've never forgotten that moment because that's when you're at one.
Yeah.
And it was just like all of a sudden, everything that was all happening was just totally irrelevant and forgotten about.
Yeah. Yeah. This idea about back to basics, right, always bring me back to what I've read and what I've heard people say, like on, especially people who were dying on their deathbed. What are the things they think about, right? I mean, they're not going to think about the expensive house or expensive car they bought, right? It's always back to basics. Like, what have I done in my life? What have I achieved? Have I done my best with my loved ones? Have I said whatever I wanted to say, right? These are all very basic human connection, right? Human things that we need to do. And so, I feel like sometimes we get so caught up, with everything that we want to achieve, everything we want to build. But then, at the end of the day, you can't take all these things with you, I rather use my resources to put it into experiences rather than to buy things, right? And so that might change when I'm older, right? And I want something a little bit more stable when I'm much, much older, not yet. So, it brings me back to, what we're talking about, like back to basics, human connection, experiences. That's far more important than anything else. Like even if people are squabbling with you, right? Like you mentioned, dealing with your sisters and all that. And it's like, leave that all behind and go for my walk and make that connection with nature and with your mom, right? In spirit. That's what is important at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, even with your courses that you teach, I think that would be a really good one to include, like just back to basics, because even though a lot of people know about it, they're just not doing it because they're on their own reprogram and and people like to follow something and feel like they're accountable. And because it's so loosely said, oh, just, bring it back to basics. But some people don't know what basic is. I remember it said to me, years ago, spend, 20 minutes in nature every day. I remember thinking at the time I was about 18, I thought that's great, but I don't have the time. Well, I'm just going to sit there and just stand, not understanding, the meaning of it to like what I do now. So words can be sometimes, I know, really loosely said and interpreted differently. And when, coming back to basics is where, obviously we don't overthink anything. And like what you said was really valid about, on your deathbed, what can you take with you? I mean, you can't take back the time. You can't rewind anything.
Yeah.
All you've got is the now. So what are you going to do with it? How are you going to spend that time?
Yeah.
And it's better to know now than wait till that time. Have that reflection and have regrets or be avoided. And I think sometimes my feeling was like, when we were talking about the Vanuatu earthquake and coming back to basics then, and it was just so nice to be amongst part of it all, disconnected from everything, coming back to basics. But the village, the natives there that actually are in the village, they do come back to basics. They're living their life every day like that. And they're the happiest people. They don't have anything, but they're happy. But in society here, we don't know what basic is sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think, if you were to teach something like that, and I think it would be really good because it would be all really simplified. The first thing would be to, spend a little bit of time in nature, but because it's structured, you can tick it off.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds so simple and easy for us, but for some people, I think they've lost their way. And Shamala, you would be the perfect person for that, to shine that light and, help people back on their pathway again.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that suggestion. That's a good idea. I will integrate that in. And it's true. I think sometimes things that we're familiar with and things that we do, we take it for granted and we think that other people know the same, but then they don't. You only realize that people don't get certain things when you have a conversation with them and you go like, oh, they don't get it or they don't know it, right?
Yeah.
When it's so much part of your life that not realizing that other people don't think the same. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's, when we're talking about, when you're on your deathbed and, the reflection, that book of, I think it's the 10 Most Regrets of the Dying. I can't remember the title, but it's something along those lines. And it was to do with about a palliative care nurse who would come and help people in their homes and just assist them in their last, in their last moments. But, she compiled a list of all these, I think it was called the 10 most regrets of the dying. And one of them was that, because obviously she, talked to a lot of people. And one of the things that's always stood out was, don't worry about what other people think. It's a big one. Because I know I was conditioned to, don't do this. What will other people think?
Oh, yeah. What will neighbors say?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before. And like, it's exactly what you just said about, it's not until, you assume people know, or they're feeling the same as what you are. It's not until when you get to talk to them that they don't know either.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I live in a entirely different dimension with people that I interact with. You know, and I feel, on many levels, I'm like a outcast, right? Because I don't do what people do. But I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not afraid of it. Being an outcast, I feel like it's important to me that I maintain what, my own beliefs and all that. And the back to basics, I think that's really the key, right? To, I think, inner happiness, inner joy. Because if you know how to go back to basics, it's very easy to tap into that inner joy. Like if something goes off balance, you know how to return to that quite easily. But if your life is very crowded with stuff, right? And you don't know how to go back to basics, it's quite a long journey to go back to self, to find that inner happiness. And I feel this is a skill. Yeah, certainly a skill that people need to learn.
What a better person to teach them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll definitely integrate it into my program. That's a wonderful suggestion.
Yeah. When there's so much noise, people can't hear.
They can't.
All they just hear is they just react to whether a noise, but they can't hear what's being said. And it's not until, things like going out in nature that removes all that, so it's not until, that noise is removed, that's when you can actually really listen. And, what you said about being an outcast, that could be your interpretation, because I think so many people think along the same lines as that they feel and think differently to others because they're comparing themselves to what's around them. But if you put all those people together who feel like that, can you imagine how many people would come together? I think there's a lot more than what we think.
Yeah.
And it's just the difference, I think, with some people they don't think that they're important enough, that their opinion or their reaction, it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It doesn't make them wrong.
Yeah, it doesn't make them wrong at all. I think in Singapore, less than 1% would think like me.
And good. That's what makes you special.
I think this topic about back to basics can, if we really were to explore it, right? There's so much to explore because there's so many different aspects of life, right? I've been hearing also about a lot of, we know Gen Zs are really into technology and all that, but I've also heard that there is a group of Gen Zs who are buying non-digital phones. They're using the analog phones, right? They're back to basics. They don't want to be on social media. My daughter, for one, right? Not really into social media. And so I feel a little bit conflicted about that because for me, with her work, she's in creative writing. I feel like that has to be marketed or expressed, right? And using social media as a tool because that's the current tool, but she doesn't want to. So I think to myself, then how are you going to get your work out there? But I'm just going to leave it to her.
She's probably keeping it back to basics. Yeah. And she might feel a bit of an outcast too because everyone's conforming into, social media.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting our perception of things, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. So I'm curious, what is your back to basic food item?
Oh, it's always fresh produce. Always. Can't go wrong. There's always some protein and lots of fresh produce. If I can't get, fresh fruit and veggies, it's just like my body cries out for that.
Yeah. Same. Reach for the fruit and apple cider vinegar with some honey. That always feels like it's a good reset. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think, I think a lot of people have gone on holidays before and they've said the food's a bit different to what they used to be eating. And I know when we traveled, say in the UK and everything, is quite heavy and stodgy, and it's the only place I've been to. Mind you, I'm not a seasoned traveller, I'll say that for sure. But on a plate, we've got mashed potato and chips.
Yeah. Cups on cups.
It's just like, okay, in need, of your own normal food. When I got back home, I could not wait, to have that freshness. And, at the moment, because it's all in summer, we've got the beautiful pineapples and watermelon and all those tropical fruits, and it's so nice. But, if it was freezing cold, that's the last thing you want.
Yeah.
So I think it just depends on, where you live and what you do. And it'd be interesting to see what our other listeners, what some of their back to basics is, because define back to basics.
Yeah.
So, like everyone's got their own interpretation, of that. It could be living off grid. It could be getting rid of all technology. It could be detoxing. It could also mean, household items with cleaning, getting rid of and just come back to basics instead of all, the cleaning products. So it'd be interesting to see the different interpretations. I know we're talking about just generally in life and not and having that stimulus there, but it'd be interesting to see what other people, what their experiences are as well.
Yeah. Tell us, comment below. Let us know. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier on about cleaning, right? Did you? Yeah. You said something about cleaning. So what I like to do sometimes when I feel too much going on, I will take a garbage bag, go around the house, pick stuff, throw them away. So I do that too. I feel, and I'm always, what I do very often, people always comment is like, why are you always moving your furniture around? And that's what I do. The other thing, to reset. I'm always moving furniture around. I'm changing position. I'm moving. So I moved into this apartment last year in March, and I think I've moved my bed and my furniture around in the bedroom like 4 times already. I just feel like, okay, the energy is stuck. I need to move things around, and then I feel like, okay, this feels good. When I was married, right? My ex used to get so annoyed with me when I'm moving furniture. And he said, why are you moving furniture again? And I said, well, the change is needed. And I was decluttering as well. So, I need to get rid of stuff. So I move stuff. So you used to get really annoyed. It's not easy, right? I mean, you live with someone who's always moving things around.
It's funny because that brought back a memory, because my partner's the same. So he likes to, just move things because it changes the energy. And I remember it was quite a while ago, and we weren't living together or anything then, but I was over at his place. It was a summer storm. And instead of it was late at night, and he said, oh, we'll watch the summer storm, but we couldn't see from his, where the pillows are, but he'll sleep on the other end of the bed. He said, well, who's to say that you've got to sleep up there? You sleep at the bottom and go, oh, this is weird. And then it's because what you used to.
Yeah.
And then, it's one of the most fondest memories I have, because it was at night. The foot end of the bed was actually near a sliding glass door, I think it was. Anyway, so it opened up all the curtains and we were just watching, the summer storm. It was probably about 9:30 at night, and all I could smell was the jasmine in the air as well, that night jasmine, the summer storm coming in. You're just putting your head down the other end of the bed, and I fell asleep there.
Nice.
And it was just amazing. And, so I've learned that when energy gets stagnant, just to shuffle things around, so I can really identify with what you're doing. So, and I find the best time for a clean out is that when you're really annoyed. It's probably the most productive.
Yes. Yeah. And you don't feel, and you have so much energy, you need to expend it, right? You need to use it up.
But I mean, it always feels good when you're not during the time, but once the job's done and you think, oh God, that feels so much better. And, it just feels better. And sounds as if you're going out and doing a clean out of your wardrobe.
Yeah. So I did that, my daughter left on Monday. On Tuesday, I took the garbage bag around the apartment, threw things out, took some clothes out. Okay, I'm going to give this away and I'm back to basic. Yeah, I think these are necessary things that I feel is part of self-care, to go back to basics. Yeah. The other thing also that is very useful is to unfriend people that, on social media. I mean, you don't have to make a big show of it. You don't have to tell them that I'm unfriending you. Just softly unfriend. I mean, especially if you don't know them very well, or you you have no real connection with them, and then they're posting things that are uninspiring or things that you're not interested in. It's okay, to unfriend people. There's nothing wrong in that.
Yeah. But it feels really good when you've done it because you don't have to see the stuff. And there's nothing, wrong, that you've not had like a conflict or any means. It just feels differently.
Yeah.
So then, you know that your feeds are sort of more in line with, what you like to see. You might not agree with whatever's, but, like I see it in our community page. To the horrible man that almost ran my daughter off the road, and name and shame. And I think, well, that's great. It's good that you can get that out. I can see that I'm not saying it like with the other person was completely in the wrong. And I just think it's just someone airing a situation, like unfortunate situation, of course, but do we need it on the community page? Because the community page is there for other reasons, I don't know. There's a few things like that I'm seeing more often now. And it was okay at the start. And now there's other things that, starting to come through. And where do you draw the line?
Yeah. I feel people are now using social media like as a point of, just renting when they actually need therapy.
There you go, Shamala.
And, so a lot of renting, I think the lines are so blurred. It's so difficult now, to determine and, what is right and what is not right. It's really difficult for many people, they don't know where the boundaries are. And I was talking about this, with my daughter. We had a discussion. We talk about, the missing years, right? The pandemic. And I told her, I said, the reason why we feel like time has passed so quickly is because of the lack of the human connection. We live our lives online. So that's why it feels like, where did my time go? Like, we don't have very distinct memories of how we spent our time during the lockdowns, during the pandemic years, because we spend so much time online. So that doesn't give us the human memory. Human memory is the human connection, right? When we meet a friend for tea, for something, right? When we have those memories, we keep intact. The time we spend online with whoever doesn't leave an impression. It's not a memory. It doesn't form a memory because it's just there's no real connection, right? The online world. Because we spend so much time there, it feels like those are missing years. I don't remember what I did.
Yeah, that's true. And it is a real blur. I mean, it was one way with the online, through the pandemic. It was the only way people could connect. So it did did have its usefulness. I am so grateful for my years growing up of just learning to ride a skateboard. And then we lived on this little bit of a top of a hill, and it and there was a big bend like on the way down. So there was a footpath that followed it. So as kids, I was probably, I don't know, 10 or 12. So you sit down on your skateboard and then you'd have your friend do the same, and you'd put your feet on their skateboard and theirs on yours. And you'd try and go down the footpath. But you know how sometimes there's a footpath that's slightly raised?
Oh, yeah.
And then we'd go, whoa! The whole idea was to avoid that so we didn't hit it and come off.
I think, growing up, trying to create a mixtape, you have to listen to the song, right? Over and over again, and know when to turn and all that, when to stop, when to press record. That is very strong in my, that memory, right? Because some of these songs that I've recorded in my mixtape are songs that I still remember now. I can sing them, right? Because you keep, it becomes a different experience. But those songs that you don't have that direct experience where you don't have to listen to it over and over again. You don't remember the lyrics. You just don't. It doesn't, it doesn't sit. It's just very different. I find the whole experience just so different.
Yeah.
Some of these memories, I mean, these things that we did, they serve a really good purpose, right? I mean, it helped us to build character. And maybe now with kids, the Gen Z, they build character in a different way. Issues with mental health is it's just very different. There's a lot of online stuff, right? That for them is very real. Like for us, because we grew up in a different time, we know that, okay, online stuff, not very real, right? But for them, because they grew up with it, the online stuff becomes so real that, online bullying, they really do take it very seriously because that's their reality. And that's why, mental health is such a big issue these days as well. And it's starting, very, very young, very young people. I think the human connection is really important. That's the one thing that is the key, right? Back to basics, human connection, human touch.
Yeah, I cannot agree anymore, because that's where I'm so used to dealing with people in my line of work with the human person inside, because they've opened up their fears, their troubles, like the vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I'm not dealing with an exterior. I'm dealing with the person inside. Like, we had this guest that was staying. They were just here for the day. They didn't want to stay the night. They paid, the rate, but they were flying overseas back to the UK, and they weren't guests. They actually just called and they just wanted the room. They paid for the whole thing, but they were just going to be there for the day, just to freshen up and shower. And they were going to be there till 7:00. And so in our resort, we do a turn down service. So we come with a little signature cookies. And then, but if they're out, for dinner, we just go in and, we just put the pillows down, turn the lights on, draw the curtains. And I said, and we prepare the room for you, and put the little cookies on the pillow. And they all go, oh, because it's just a really nice, special touch.
Yeah.
Especially for them, it's that human touch. So at the end of this, I then knocked on this person's door. Oh, just checking to make sure everything's okay. I know that you're departing soon. And he said, yes, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. And I said, oh, would you like some turned down cookies to take with you? I tell you what, it made their day. Yeah. And I tell you what, it's so special when it does, because people are losing that. And I always hope that if the more that you can do and the more impact it will help someone, that it will be like a ripple effect as well, because that's what we're lacking. It's just that human touch and connection.
Yeah. I think people, maybe they don't realize that they are craving to be seen until they're seen. And then they go like, it's just, I think people just get so caught up, right, with things that when you actually see them, acknowledge them and say, hey, good morning, how's your day? Even if you don't know them, they go like, oh, okay, and they start to behave differently. And I think, it's so, so important. This basic acknowledgement of another human being, right, is really the key. So, in spiritual circles, we like to say, put our hands together, we say namaste, right? So namaste is, I see you, right? I recognize and see the divine in you. And so when someone acknowledges that and then you say it back, I mean, that's in Sanskrit, obviously. It's still practiced in parts of India and perhaps Nepal. But I mean, if we acknowledge, we don't have to do this. Acknowledge someone, it's really telling them that, I see the divine in you, I recognize you as a fellow human being. That's really a basic thing to do.
A lot of people feel like their voice or their opinion or their presence doesn't matter as well, that they're not heard. Yeah. They're not seen, especially the older people. I get a lot of comments from my older clients saying how they're made to be felt like they're invisible, that society will just overlook them, and they're just because they're old. And I've seen that happen.
Me too.
And it does happen. I don't know why it happened, because it just is a person the same as the person standing next to them.
Let's talk about this in our next episode. I feel this is such an important topic. I feel that we need to also, through our sharing, possibly educate people on why it's important to acknowledge, because, I take care of my old parents, right? So I know what they experience, and I've witnessed it, and I've seen how people interact with them or not interact with them and are blind to them. It's sad. People just look at them, oh, you're old, you're irrelevant, like you no longer need to be here kind of attitude. Yeah, it's really a topic that we can talk about.
It's interesting because you look at newborn babies and how much attention they get.
Yes.
And then because it brings out this innocence in other people.
Yeah.
And so it's from one end of the scale to another. Everyone, I was like, well, when I say everyone, like newborn babies, they're just like, oh, they're so innocent. So what is it about the baby that that we want to sort of gravitate towards?
I think it's life, it's energy. People want that energy. But looking at an old person, there's a fear of dying, right? Fear of aging, fear of dying. And if we avoid old people because we have a fear of aging and fear of dying, this is really a lot of inner work that's really needed, because we're not Peter Pan, we don't live forever. We're not young forever either, right? Embracing the aging process is so important.
That's where we learn from.
Exactly.
Yeah. you know, so much wisdom, as I'm sure, you know, for yourself, especially, you know, with your parents, there's so much wisdom that's been handed down. It's just that so many people have got, you know, their mouth is too open and their ears are too closed.
Shall we sign off?
So this is another great conversation again had by Shamala and myself. So I'm Alina Anderson from Queensland, Australia, signing off.
This is Shamala from Singapore signing off. And if you need to get hold of either one of us, our details are below in the description box. Bye.
Bye.